Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Hi, thank you, Phil, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft, and this is the Innovation Podcast, where we interview only the smartest people we can find.
Uh-oh.
Jennifer, you want to take a couple of minutes just to explain what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here and be part of the podcast and your viewership. I actually have worked for the rail industry for over 15 years. And I have been really blessed and excited to actually start my own company where I am working with individuals that are learning, how to get into this rail industry. I worked for a large corporation and helped build a shared service, but after years of doing that, I've now branched out and working with kind of a different type of customer base that I've never really had a chance to work with to really drive how does the rail industry work and how can it be beneficial for you and for your company. So it's been exciting. I've only been doing it for a couple months now and been very blessed to have some really good customers come on and be able to have opportunities like this to speak about the rail industry to viewers and connect people that the rail isn't always so scary. So
How did you get started in that industry? I'm curious.
my background was really I was an accountant that moved into supply chain in a large corporation. And then as regulatory requirements really started bringing more and more changes to the industry, the corporation that I was working with decided to build a shared service rail operations. And I was lucky to be part of that team to build um, that shared service supporting that large corporation, and it kind of grew from there. And I learned a lot. I had great mentors that had been in the industry for many years, and just really got to get my hands dirty in all different parts of the industry, from procuring freight to bringing on assets to tracking and tracing to understanding compliance regulatory requirements around that industry.
Is that an industry that's changed a lot from a regulatory perspective over the years?
I would say that unfortunately, it's an industry that has been around for over 200 years and probably one of the oldest industries. And it I'm going to get a lot of contradiction, right? But from my point of view, this is a very strong relationship handshake business. So it's really knowing the secret handshake when you go to an event or you have a partner. It's really understanding that, which I think really drives the entering into this type of industry for businesses, especially small industries. They don't know those people. They don't know the secret handshake that's happening, right? And contracts that are being, still, driving relationships between partners. I mean, we had a contract that was from 1980, which was extremely beneficial for that shipper and us as a large corporation. A small corporation or small shipper coming into the industry isn't going to have those same types of terms. So it's really, I think, driving how do we make business in the industry faster and allow more people to come into the industry and have the benefits that other people have in it. And I think that that's one thing that I'm very passionate about. Like, let's get on a level playing field. Let's drive more innovation to help people come into the industry and find the benefits of really being in the rail industry.
how does that even happen? A contract from the 80s, like, there's no expiry date, there's no renewal terms or anything like that. It's just
There's called a master contract, and that master contract just lives on. And then each, they call it a rider. A rider comes in and really kind of designates, that term and the rate. But your master really what drives like the meat and potatoes of, running that contract doesn't change, and it's really beneficial. Now, I will say the person that's on the other side of that contract brings it up every time there's something, right? Like,
right.
should we look at that master contract and, see how we work through
So
that?
let's take the opportunity this year. We could update it.
Exactly.
So, what do you do now?
Yeah, so I have a number of things that I do. One thing that I really have been focused on is really educating and providing, training. The generation or the new generation that's coming into the workforce, they learn a little different than what we do.
You've
And
noticed.
I have noticed, yes. And so, hands-on is going to be your best learning tool, right? I'm going to show you, you're going to watch me, you're going to do it, I'm going to watch you. We'll have this continuous cycle feedback. Well, when you talk about new people coming in to your organization, they're learning your business. So, for example, say somebody is getting hired on to Exxon, right? They're learning that oil and gas industry on top of how do I manage and ship rail cars for that industry. So then you're learning a whole nother industry on top of that oil and gas industry. So it's new terminology, it's new, people to connect with, different systems. There's a lot of that happens. So my platform that I've built is really to help people that are coming into the industry to say, okay, what is rail lingo? What does different terms really mean? How do they affect the industry? And how do you communicate to different pieces of the industry? So how do I talk to a lessor if I want to get equipment? How do I talk to the railroad if I need a car, shipped? How do I talk to the railroad when my car stops moving and I don't know why? And how do I understand and who do I contact? There's all of these different pieces that help drive that. So that's one thing that I've done. I used to, really wish that I had some type of platform like this when I was running the logistics side of the house, and have some consistencies to, reduce the operational errors that really it was a lack of training on my part to my new people to really get them up to speed appropriately.
So, when you say platform, do you mean just kind of your coaching plan? Is it like a one-on-one type engagement, or do you have a web platform, like an actual software platform that you built?
Yeah, so I have actually created a website that has a self-service training platform associated with it. So you can sign up for the training program, and it will take you through the training opportunities throughout the entire software. Self-paced. There's templates. There's lingo. There's definitely a video that's not longer than 3 to 5 minutes. Because if you think a little bit about today, we either chat GPT something, we go to YouTube, we go to Google and say, okay, I need to know how to do this. I need to expedite a shipment. So that is really, kind of a small, 3 to 5 minute video to say, this is how I expedite a shipment. This is who I contact. Here's a list of all the railroads that you're supposed to contact, wherever your rail car is that you need to, understand, or who I need to contact for that.
What are the plans for that platform? Like, how do you see this evolving, like the next couple of years?
So I really want to have more and more programs that are available. So the large corporation I used to be part of, we actually brought in large intern classes. And we wanted to give them real life scenarios, right? They came in and they actually did the work along with us. They trained and they worked and did real life work. They didn't get coffee, they came in. And so one of the big pieces of that I'd like to do is really build packages that are, okay, here's a package for an intern that can come in and at least understand high level, how does the rail, structure work? What is terminology that's important? And how do I enter a way bill to help them be able to give more as soon as they sit in that chair versus, that supervisor, that manager, whoever's, working with that intern is spending the first week, training them on all of that. So how do we, really get training and get, people excited to join this industry and kind of, you know, bring it down to a level that is consumable so that they can find value in it.
The rails industry being, quote unquote, a legacy industry, right? So old, you said 200 years. Obviously, you're kind of part of that innovation wave, let's say, right? With your platform, you're trying to modernize certain practices, perhaps. Would you say knowledge transfer is a big issue with the newer generation?
Yeah, absolutely. We're losing, really those industry leaders from, retirement and really, understanding the full scope of
Hmm.
how the whole industry works. And when you start losing those key leaders in this industry, you
Yeah.
feel it for sure. I think something that, I think a lot about and, is what really drives innovation in an industry. That's a question that I
Oh,
haven't
okay. I
really,
thought you were going to give me the answer, but it's an open question.
what are some things that you think drive innovation in an industry?
I mean, typically it would be out of necessity, right? Like almost
Hmm.
survival. Like you need to adapt or die, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I asked about the knowledge transfer is because through the series, obviously we've been kind of focusing on a lot of oil and gas people, of energy sector people, and it's a recurring theme of we don't really have, there's no transfer that happens. Just people retire, leave the industry, and then new people come in. And they're almost like, "What do I do with my hands?" Right? And it just perhaps it's a good opportunity, and perhaps the timing is good also with all this model training, right, on AI, for instance, where you could really now start storing and transferring that knowledge into kind of almost like a permanent, query database. And so I wonder, do you see an opportunity like that? And even through your own platform, have you looked at AI as a potential add-on?
I think that's what's so interesting about this. And back to your question about, is that knowledge transfer not happening? I think that in the rail industry, you know, there's been a lot of changes that have happened that were forced more by regulatory changes and
Hmm.
incidents that were catastrophic. I don't know if, you're up in Canada, but there was an incident that happened in 2013 called the Lac Magenta Quebec
Yeah.
train incident. That spurred a, a massive regulatory change that happened. There was another, so just to connect your viewers to what happened there was on July 6, 2013 at 1:14 a.m. There was what we call as a unit train of crude cars that rolled down a hill, derailed in the middle of a town,
Hmm.
killed, 43 people, and basically turned into, that town turned into a fire, bomb that went off in the middle of the town. That spurred innovation for the industry. That spurred that there was a um, new congressional hearing to bring on what is called the FAST Act and to ensure that we do not ship. flammables like crude ethanol into a specific type of rail car that was being utilized at the time. And so I think the regulatory pressures have driven more innovation than, the market pressures or the customer demand or the new capabilities of breakthrough. And I think it's sad. And I think we've got to bring in new talent. We've got to transfer the knowledge from the people that understand how this industry works and really drive change in this industry. And how do we really push that? And you've got your real big groups that drive this industry, right? There's 6 Class 1 railroads that drive how you manage freight. There's big leasing companies that own 80% of the equipment that you're going to utilize. It's really, how do you put pressure on them to do that? And then how do you bring talent in that has that innovative mindset, that's willing to talk about AI and, process improvements, and how do we drive a faster business model to ensure that we have a level playing field and we are really bringing value to your customers all the way across the board.
So what change would you like to see happen? Like, what would you be most excited about in terms of innovation?
I think it's the ease of doing business. Again, the rail industry is all about your secret handshake.
Is it a literal secret handshake? Like, there's, you do this and
Right? Yeah. And you got to call your marketing buddy from
mm,
the class going to give you a deal on this, shipping lane. And how do you really drive that? Where I'm working for 2 different customers, and I needed the same lane from Houston to New Orleans, and the same railroad gives me a quote that's really almost $1,000 per rail car apart. And it's just like having this conversation with them to be like, how does that make any sense? It's going on the same equipment, you're picking it up from the same location, it's going down to the same origin. It's going to be switched off to go east, and they don't really have a reasoning. It's like, oh well, okay, I can give you that price for that customer too.
oh, so you just ask,
You just
right?
ask,
Yeah.
you just ask, and it's the secret handshake, and it's like, well, how many people don't know to ask?
Yeah, but that's true in, in life in general, not just in the rail industry. Sometimes all you have to do is ask. Um, so we talked about 40-plus-year-old contracts earlier. Give me an example of an outdated process in your industry that is not going away. And I guess, like you said, if it's not broken, they're not going to fix it, right? And from
Mhm.
innovation. So what's like, where do they use spreadsheets and they shouldn't?
Everywhere. Yeah, yeah. It's death by spreadsheets, right?
Hmm.
And death by email. I mean, I think it's really, driving that technology and partnering with the people that are really large in this industry to drive those changes. I think about DoorDash, and I was down in Phoenix, and I saw this little robot driving without a person delivering
Like in
food.
a car?
It was just this little tiny robot, that was
Really?
out on the campus.
We don't
That's
have those here. Maybe it's too cold. Maybe they won't survive. The lithium battery is gonna die like in 5 minutes.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. But I was floored by seeing this little tiny robot going and delivering food on the college campus, and it's like, man, that is so cool. And
It
if
is
I was a
cool.
college student, I'd be like, I want to work for the little robot, right? Like I want to drive
Mm,
change there. The rail, you sit there, and most people's exposure to the rail is sitting behind a crossing going like, I wish this train would get out of my way so I can get to my destination.
Hmm.
There isn't a like wow factor to say, let's bring in somebody that's going to really change this up and build a little robot for rail, right? They're using drones and things like that for track inspections. They've got pretty cool machines to help redo, track structures and, you know, to watch them rebuild a bridge because there was a flood. It's impressive, right? They've got really good crews, great engineers that really can do that. But I think where we're stuck back on spreadsheets is really the operations side, and where we're
Hmm.
slow to change is the operations side. It's like freight management, right? That's your biggest, piece of the pie. That's some of, companies' biggest expense on their P&L is their freight expense, right? And it's how do we make that easier without looking at, I need to send an empty car and I got to read a 40-page tariff document to figure out what my empty rate's going to be. It's really like, you know, really driving that to be more simple, right? And how do we get simplicity back into it without having to have that extensive knowledge transfer that we were talking about earlier, or, understanding how to get it. And every railroad's different, you know. How do you get that information is completely different per every railroad that you're going to work with. The smaller railroads that we refer to as a short line or a regional railroad, you know, they might not have a website. So you got to know who to call, down to that level.
You
Or
open the
that,
book and then
yeah,
okay, okay, yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's super outdated. And you get Cecil on the other end that's like, oh, well, we don't really, I don't really know how that works. Or, you lose the knowledge transfer even at that level, where it's just like, okay, so you're going to just surprise me on an invoice, or what's going to happen here to get my shipment, down to that region. And so I think that's that operation side of the house is really, really just needing that facelift and that uplift. I mean, I I worked for an extremely large corporation that had lots of different commodities. We managed 16,000 rail cars, and the first two tools I opened every day was my email and Excel every day. It
mm,
wasn't some really cool system that's going to help me say this is, these are my problem areas or this is what's happening. It was, Excel spreadsheets that were managed off of databases, access databases
uh-huh.
and things like that have been around for 10 years. Or we said, we're going to put this small prototype together and then we're going to build onto that to, really drive a better system. We never built a better system. We still relied on that access database feeding us that information.
Yeah, it's gonna take for the software to be discontinued for them to really, I think, have to move. But if it works, right?
Yeah.
Um, I interviewed somebody who I think as part of their process, they were taking photos of inventory and sending text messages, right? But it works,
Yeah.
and as long as you don't have to scale it necessarily, like maybe there's no need for to change. But what's really good at querying large amount of data is LLMs.
Hmm.
So I think the solution is probably anytime you're dealing with spreadsheets, basically, like
Hmm.
LLMs are interesting. Even for me as my day to day now, like I get like a big document, I ask ChatGPT to summarize it for me, right?
Yeah, I don't think I would be as far as I am with building my business if it wasn't for tools like ChatGPT. I utilize another tool called Beyond that helps with my training videos that I
Cool.
basically drop that script in and they generate the video. And I have AI talking, you have talking heads that are available that you got to be a little careful with them. Sometimes their lips don't match, which,
Yep, of course.
that looks a little odd. So, but, those are the tools that are available. And again, I'm a very small business owner starting out. So I don't have a huge marketing budget and I don't have, a ton of people behind me that have that digital marketing degree that can come in and really create some really, really cool stuff. But the tools that are available to, just out for commercialization has really allowed me to get good content out that's, easy to understand and can resonate with customers and, continue to build, my brand and the industry. So
Well, I think it's much easier to start a business. There's more competition. Obviously, it's it could be a bit of a tougher market, but it's easier to appear big, right?
yeah,
Because back in the day, you were alone. You have to do everything yourself. Now you basically can have like an army of agents and different software that essentially do most of the work on your behalf. So it must be exciting. Like I see a lot, and I see the trends now is to try to keep your company as lean as possible and scale as fast as possible without humans, if you will.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that that's available today. I mean, generating a contract that I needed for my consulting customers, or um, you know, all of that would have took me significantly a lot more time than just utilizing, that chat GPT functionalities or co-pilots within Microsoft, or, the Google tools that help you, what kind of risk am I putting myself into if I take this on, or
Right.
what kind of risk do I need to, so I don't need an entire legal team that's going to be available.
That's a lifesaver. Obviously, disclaimer, you should not necessarily use ChatGPT as your, legal advice at all times. However, sometimes like you would spend a couple $1,000s of consulting with lawyers just to get like a basic answer. And nowadays you can just, check, with ChatGPT. Obviously there's, you need to cross-reference it and make sure that it's not hallucinating, but
Mhm.
saving so much time. And even just like changing clauses, like just a back and forth with legal sometimes, right? Where
Mhm.
you have a client, they have some legal changes. Okay, what does that mean? And then draft a clause that incorporates this, but also takes this into account, in this jurisdiction, and it's going to do a very good job. I don't even think lawyers could argue that you should use it for the basic stuff nowadays.
Yeah. Or at least it helps you outline, what do I need to ask my attorney, right?
Yeah,
So, it's going to reduce the time that you're going to spend. Something else that I'm working on for a customer is I'm doing an RFP to find a CPA firm right now, for
a
them.
PA firm.
CPA firm,
Oh,
so a
CPA.
certified
Yeah, yeah,
accountant,
yeah.
and, I really utilize ChatGPT to say, okay, what do I need? What does the CPA firm really need to know about this business to be able to come and give me a really good quote? And, it really gave me a great outline to say, okay, this is what I need to do. Of course I tweaked it and I took stuff out and I added things and, kind of come up with it. But gosh, just having that outline to go forward with, to make sure that I've got some relevant and really good information that might reduce the back and forth communication that I'm going to have with a number of these CPA firms is huge. And again, we would have Googled it, before, but really having ChatGPT really drive, that outline to say this is what's important, this is what's not important, is definitely, you know, key.
As a solopreneur, I assume you're solo. I don't know if you have partners or not, but ChatGPT is also like it's a bouncing board for ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like people used to do that with a co-founder,
Yeah.
and it was hard to do that if you were alone. You basically, you had to trust your instincts and then probably make mistakes, and
Yeah,
because you
exactly.
can really argue about anything. Now you can basically argue with AI. Although, ChatGPT, you kind of have to tell it needs to argue. The new version is better, but like it got at one point it was a little too. Oh yeah, this is a great idea. Yes, you should absolutely do that.
Right, right.
We're coming up on time, Jennifer. I want to be mindful. I know you have work to do, I assume. Final question, and if you've listened to the show as you have, you probably know that it's a lot of the same answers, but I'm going to ask anyway. What's the real blocker for innovation in the rails industry? Is it the technology, the lack of resources, or culture?
I'd say it's culture is probably the big one. It's really driving a innovative mindset that's going to change the industry to get faster, to drive faster innovation, to drive the need for customers to really push the folks that have the decisions and that's driving the current industry to wanting to provide a better service and to be more customer focused than bottom line focused. So I would say it's going to be your culture, and it's going to be culture to bring in top talent that's going to not ask why, but why not?
Mm.
Why not do we do this? Why can't we drive this? Why can't you get that to me faster? I've got to run a business. And I think those are the questions that we need to really start asking to help drive innovation in this rail industry.
I think North America in general could benefit from faster trains, not just on the
Mm-hmm.
commercial side, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, we'll see. Maybe when AI takes over as the new ruler, they
Mm-hmm.
will make different decisions. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for jumping on. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And Phil, have a great day.